Restaurants and romance, empire and opera, fun, surprising experiences at every one of the more than 300 stops on the metro. My name is Lisa. I'm a writer and tour guide. I carry a Canadian passport, but all we'll need is a ticket for the metro system as I show you historic, inspirational, endlessly fabulous Paris. I'd like to share my love for this spectacular city with you, one stop after the next, by way of the exciting Paris metro system. So grab your French phrasebook and put on your walking shoes. We're going to Paris. Next stop, Opera. Today I want to take you to the Opera metro station, that is, right in the heart of Baron Haussmann's Paris. We'll start at the eye-popping Opera House, and we don't have to go far to check out some of my favorite architecture, opulent shops, jewelry makers, historic cafes, parfumerie, and all kinds of spots to take a break and enjoy a bite to eat in a city with a surprising variety of tastes.
This is Metro Opéra, which brings you out right in the middle of Place de l'Opéra, which was the crowning achievement, the center for Haussmann's revamp of the right bank under the Second Empire. Now, this area became a glittering jewel of theaters and cafes and shopping, partly because of this crisscrossing of boulevards here. We've got the Boulevard des Italiens, named for the theater, the Comédie Italienne. We've got the Rue du 4 Septembre. We have the fabulous wide Avenue de l'Opéra, which leads straight down to the Louvre. So Napoleon III and the Empress Eugénie could leave their palace and go straight to the opera to see shows. We have Rue de la Paix leading to Place Vendôme, very elegant down there. And we have Boulevard des Capucines, which is a beautiful historic boulevard to stroll along. All of these boulevards lead to the opera, the Palais Garnier Opera House.
Today, the opulent opera house and the place which surrounds it seem to have been built with only art and aesthetics in mind. But Baron Haussmann, who was commissioned by Napoleon III to renovate the city, had more practical goals. Prior to his improvements and those which preceded them, Paris was much as it had been in medieval times. Narrow, uneven streets and inconsistent buildings impeded traffic flow, and an inadequate sewage system contributed to outbreaks of disease. In the middle of the 1800s, Baron Haussmann took advantage of a political climate that allowed for vast expropriations for the public interest. This led to the demolition of some 20,000 houses and regulations dictating the construction of 40,000 new ones between 1852 and 1872. This restoration of the city created the present-day face of Paris. Wide, straight boulevards with uniform buildings and large open squares at the crossroads. Here, at Place de l'Opéra, Baron Haussmann's plan gave life to the fabulous and busy intersection that is the setting for the breathtaking Paris Opera House, or Palais Garnier.
Charles Garnier was a young architect who won the prestigious competition to design a new opera house for Napoleon III under the Second Empire.
The young architect had to overcome many difficulties during the planning and construction of the opera house. The presence of underground water made it necessary to construct a huge concrete reservoir to counteract water pressure in the surrounding soil. The ingenious solution to the problem of water infiltration not only created a reserve of water for firemen, but is also the origin of the legend of an underground lake beneath the opera. Facing many challenges and difficulties, among them getting his designs accepted by the people of Paris, who saw the project as a colossal waste of money, as well as Baron Haussmann, who was more interested in the flow of traffic in his boulevards than in the requirements of such a grand building, and even the Empress herself, who questioned the building's unconventional style. Despite all of this, the young Garnier managed to erect a monument that is today arguably the most famous opera house in the world. His likeness still graces the building, which came perilously close to never being completed. In September of 1870, the empire collapsed after a disastrous war with Prussia. Paris was besieged, and without the emperor or the empress within the city, the unfinished opera house was taken over by the army and used as a storehouse for food and supplies. The gorgeous opera house became a symbol for the hated fallen empire, and it seemed that Garnier's work would never be finished. However, 3 years later, when the original opera house on Rue Pelletier burned in 1873, Charles Garnier was pressed to complete the new metal-framed and far less flammable Paris Opera House.
Finally, in 1875, the sculpture-covered building was opened, and the debut of performances here was the C&B Scene event of the season.
The empire had fallen, and Napoleon III died in exile without ever seeing his grand opera house completed. But the people of the Third Republic accepted the ornate palace and flocked to see the result of 15 years' work when it was finally opened to the public. The access areas of theaters had, until Garnier, been treated as utilitarian spaces, merely a way for people to get in and out of the auditorium and to move about between acts. But here in the new Opera House, the entry with its great staircase and grand foyer was totally innovative in its grandiose decor. Onyx and marble, gilding and sculpture, ornate detail and delicate proportion combine to set the stage for an evening of music and spectacle. The huge stage and 2,000-seat auditorium are more traditional in their design, but no less gorgeous in the gold and red warmth of the classic Italian style. High above the plush seats and surrounded by the painting of Marc Chagall, added during the 1960s renovation, you'll see Garnier's original 7-ton light fixture with its 340 individual points of light. Have taken their turn at the stage at the Palais Garnier. But here the architecture will always be the star attraction. And there is no shortage of attractions in the Metro Opéra area of Paris. I've got a rather tasty one lined up just across the street, right after this. We're in gorgeous, bustling, passionate Paris, and we're exploring the city one metro stop at a time. Today, we're in the area around the opera station, and there is certainly plenty to see and do here in the heart of Baron Haussmann's Paris. Boulevard de l'Opéra is often the first and last part of the City of Light that you'll see, as the Roissy Bus airport shuttle connecting Charles de Gaulle International to the city arrives at and departs from this busy and historic intersection. After a transatlantic flight, you may not be in the mood to immediately launch into a tour of the Opera House with your luggage in tow. But I've selected another first stop that you might find more relaxing and informative.
Paris Story is a great place to start your experience of the city if you've never been to Paris before. You can come inside, spend an hour getting to know the history of the city, especially if you're traveling with kids. It's great because it's a film and multimedia experience, and then you can go out into the city having recovered from your jet lag a little bit and explore the neighborhood.
How fitting in Paris, the birthplace of motion pictures, to be welcomed to the city by a film. The 50-minute production will bring you up to date on the last 2,000 years or so of goings-on here in Paris. Originally, there was only the film and some printed tourist information available here. But over the years, the father and son team who manage Paris Story have updated the film to include the latest additions to the city. And most recently, they've added a three-dimensional interactive model of Paris. Visitors can light up points of interest and plan their trip while also linking to information on touchscreens connected to the miniature city. Paris has many more things to see and do than can ever be made to fit into a single day or even a single trip. But the kind of information you can get from Paris Story will help you make well-informed choices for your visit.
Boulevard des Capucines comes right off Place de l'Opéra, and it's called Capucine because of the nunnery that stood here. Today, the boulevard is a wonderful place to stroll because of all the historic locations along here. And starting off immediately facing the Opéra is Café de la Paix, which interestingly was actually designed by the same young architect, Charles Garnier, who won the competition to design the Opera House. From the moment Café de la Paix opened in 1862, it was the place to see and be seen. Very fashionable. Oscar Wilde used to dine here. Marlene Dietrich dined here. And most famously, right at the end of World War II, to celebrate, General Charles de Gaulle ate an omelette at Café de la Paix.
I won't be meeting any great celebrity to share a table with today, but at least I won't appear rude as I stare out the window at the spectacular Opera House. I can't help but wonder if perhaps Garnier sat at this very window over 100 years ago, admiring his finally completed labor of love, the opera.
Merci. That looks great. Merci.
Très bon appétit, madame.
Merci. You see, I ordered the famous millefeuille, the 1,000 layers of custard, because that's one of the things Café de la Paix is famous for. Not only desserts, though, this cafe is also famous because of its fabulous outdoor terrace, which has been here since it opened, on the sidewalk overlooking the beautiful Place de l'Opéra. Now, if you come inside, as I have, it's a lovely interior, yes, obviously, but the odd thing, because it's such an old building, when you're sitting in Café de la Paix, every metro that goes by in Metro Opéra, you feel rumbling under your feet. So I'm going to eat my millefeuille and have my lovely café crème and think about the metro system just a little.
The elaborately decorated pastry and the great view here suits the gorgeous old Café de la Paix because the over-the-top opera building outside is mirrored by the Second Empire in here. The Café de la Paix is a perfectly preserved example of the grand style of a time gone by. Painted ceilings, gilded columns, and gorgeous frescoes adorn this special café. Little wonder that the Empress Eugénie herself was present when the establishment was inaugurated in 1862. The café is part of the Paris Grand Hotel, now owned by the Intercontinental chain. The historic hotel has been beautifully renovated while maintaining the opulent grandeur in keeping with a luxury hotel, offering suites that overlook the Palais Garnier. As well as the Café de la Paix, there is the La Verrière restaurant, a peaceful winter garden just off the hotel lobby. The Grand is also home to the famous Salon Opéra. You may recognize it from some of the more famous Paris fashion shows that are held in this glittering space. Because the neighborhood is so popular, you may have to book a year ahead of your trip, but there's no shortage of historic hotels to choose from here on the Boulevard des Capucines. The Hotel Scribe is the first place moving pictures were shown by the Lumière brothers, who invented cinema here in France. And on December 28, 1895, in the Grand Salon of the cafe in this hotel, the public was finally invited to see the picture move. Le Scribe is proud of its link to the birth of cinema here in a city with a passion for movies. The hotel restaurant, Le Lumière, pays homage to the pioneers.
Over on this side of the Boulevard des Capucines at number 35 used to be the home of French photographer Nadar. And in 1874, 30 painters who were independent and would go on to become the Impressionists first showed their work to the public here. Now, the Impressionists loved to paint in this area, including Claude Monet, who did a very famous painting called Boulevard des Capucines.
If you're starting to get the idea that there's a lot packed into a small space here around the Métro Opéra, you're right. Let me show you a little further along the boulevard to the addresses of some more recent entertainment events.
Miss Thangat was the best-paid female performer of her day, which was the early part of the 20th century. And for 50 years, Miss Thangat lived here on the Boulevard des Capucines at number 24. Reputation-wise, think of Madonna, but much earlier in the century. Now, right next door at number 26, we have the Olympia, which is the most prestigious concert hall in France if you're a rock band. It actually opened in 1893. It was a wonderful music hall, and it was opened because the owner of the property had a roller coaster that was shut down by the police for safety reasons. So he went into theater. Now, everybody has played here. Maurice Chevalier sang here, Edith Piaf sang here, and actually donated the proceeds of one of her concerts to the theater managers because they were going broke. Now, more recently, the Beatles have played here, the Rolling Stones have played here, and anybody who is anybody in the rock world has tried to get a gig at the Olympia.
The Opera District in Paris have some of the most expensive restaurants on earth. But I want to take you for a sandwich where everyday Parisians like to stop right after this. We're in gorgeous, delicious, spectacular Paris. We're exploring the area near the Métro Opéra station today, and we have lots to see. One of my favorite places to drop in when I'm in this part of the city is perhaps less well known than the Eiffel Tower, but the locals keep coming back to this little spot on Rue des Capucines.
This is the Petit Vendôme. It is a fabulous place for sandwiches. The best thing for me is to get here a little bit early before the real madness hits, because right at lunchtime, this place is packed. The comptoir has people from all over the quartier ordering sandwiches, and the selection here is fabulous.
A simple, fresh-made sandwich may not be the kind of cuisine you first picture when you imagine dining out in the Opera District. But it's clear from the popularity of the Petit Vendôme that owner Gilles Caussade understands what working Parisians want for lunch.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
It's just about to get really busy in here as the lunch crowd breaks for a casse-croûte. But Gilles agreed to sit with me for a few minutes and even tell me the secret of his success.
There are 4 secrets to make a good sandwich.
Okay.
First, the bread. Bread is very important. It comes from Julien. And when the bread comes, we go like this to see if the noise is good.
So if it's crisp enough on the outside, yeah, because some of them are soggy, and that's so depressing. Yeah, I totally agree.
Second secret is the butter. We have very rich butter from Normandy.
Excellent.
No sterilized milk, nothing, just real butter. The third is the quality of the products. Those are coming from small shops in Auvergne, in Cantal, and both the cheese and the charcuterie comes from very small producers who are very keen of quality. And the fourth secret is that every sandwich is made to your order. Not one sandwich is prepared an hour in advance. It's one by one. That's why there is a queue also. Now, which is interesting is that in this whole area, there are not many places like that left. Everything is gray and white, everything is lounge, and we are not lounge at all. We are typical French bistro. You can eat there for very reasonable price, really French cooking. And we want to remain like this. We will never change. That's for sure.
The other sandwich that I know I've had here is the special. And, tell me a little bit about the special, because it's a little secret.
Special is the fresh goat cheese, cured ham, and olive oil that I produce personally. I have olive trees in Provence, and that's my second passion is olive oil. Wow. So we have every year our own olive oil, which is very good. Yeah, it's great. It's
good olive oil, just on, the good bread, good olive oil, that's almost all you need.
Sure, absolutely.
And a good glass of wine.
Yeah, yes, wine is very important, obviously.
Thank you so much, Gilles, for your time. I'm really looking forward to my sandwich, and I love talking about food, so thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to have you.
Okay, it was
really,
a huge pleasure.
Our Canadian friend. Very nice.
Gilles' place is starting to fill up with the lunch crowd, so I better let him get back to work. I'll find a sunny bench somewhere to sit and enjoy my sandwich while taking in some of the gorgeous architecture in the area of Metro Opéra. Like this charming little building at the corner of Boulevard des Italiens. Today, it's an office block owned by a bank. Before that, a very pricey restaurant where it picked up the nickname of La Maison d'Arrêt, or the Golden House. And if we look even further back, this was once the Hôtel Stainville-Choiseul, where Madame Tallien once lived. She was one of a group of eccentric, well-to-do women known as the Marvelous, who scandalized Parisians with their transparent gowns after the French Revolution. History is still alive and well in the Opera District of Paris. You can even order jewels from the very same place where the Empress herself once shopped. I'll show you right after this. Paris, 2,300,000 people, 40,000 restaurants, and millions of things to see and do. Today, we're checking out the area immediately around the Metro Opéra. Let's continue by strolling down Rue de la Paix, a couple of blocks southwest of the Metro, to a very chic little area I'd like to show you. Place Vendôme.
Place Vendôme was named for the Duke of Vendôme, who was the illegitimate son of Henry IV. Vendôme's mansion stood here. Then in 1699, the great French designer Mansart replanned the square so that by the early 1700s, this elongated octagon was beautifully designed with a huge statue of the king in the middle.
The king's statue, like so many symbols of its kind, was torn down during the French Revolution. The tall, Roman-inspired column that stands in Place Vendôme today was erected by Napoleon I in 1810. It's comprised of some 425 bronze plates said to be made from the bronze of enemy cannon captured by Napoleon's armies as they battled across Europe.
Now, this column was torn down, yet again, by the people in the Paris Commune. And finally, when the Commune was suppressed, the government blamed the painter Courbet for tearing down the column. They said that he had roused the rabble and it was his fault and he had to pay the bill. He ended up going to prison for 2 years because of this.
Today, the Place Vendôme is home to French Ministry of Justice offices, as well as some very high-end jewelry shops and financial institutions. Speaking of jewels, I'd like to show you the oldest existing family business in all of Europe. At number 9, Rue de la Paix, about halfway between Place Vendôme and the Opera, you'll find the Malario Jewelers, in business for 14 generations. Operating since 1613, the family has been at this same address since 1815. As kings and queens, emperors and empresses came and went, this fine jeweler was always here, and no doubt created many beautiful objects for these most demanding of clients. Josephine herself had pieces commissioned here before marrying Napoleon. Napoleon III was a regular customer, but perhaps nobody was a better client than Empress Eugénie, whose name appears again and again in the order books of the era. She returned every year during the Second Empire to order and purchase more of the fine jeweler's work. The work itself has changed very little over the centuries, as the same tools and techniques are used in the creation of perfect, one-of-a-kind pieces. A simple diamond and ruby ring, like this one, can take upwards of 30 man-hours from conception to completion. A more complicated necklace can run into several hundreds of hours of work. But the result is always a piece of jewelry with a level of beauty and heritage that is simply without peer. The Maison Malario also makes fine trophies, like the Coupe des Mousquetaires, awarded to French tennis champions, and the simply amazing ceremonial swords presented to members of the Académie Française. I'm not quite ready to add my name to the order list next to Josephine's at Malario just yet. But if you follow me just off Rue de la Paix and down Rue Daniel Casanova, there's another place to pick out something nice that may fit a little more easily into your travel budget.
This is the Place du Marché Saint-Honoré. On my right, there's a glass shopping building that was put up in 1997. But to my left, there's a wonderful food market that is here all day on Wednesday and on Saturday mornings.
The first market here offered produce brought in from the fields in 1810, although the history of this space dates back hundreds of years before that, when a religious order called the Jacobins erected a large convent here. The name was later taken by the Jacobin Club, a political club that greatly influenced the French Revolution. They used the convent as a meeting place. The only vestige of the Jacobins now is the name given to the pedestrian passage, Passage des Jacobins, which crosses through the glass shopping structure. Though modern in its construction and materials, the glass building takes cues from 19th century Paris shopping, with a covered passage giving onto individual boutiques. Financial offices also occupy this space that is appreciated by street musicians for its unique acoustics. I, for one, appreciate the way the glass outer walls reflect the surrounding older buildings, making the walls appear to blend in while still maintaining their own individual style. And while I'm telling you about individual style in the Opera district, I just have to show you this next little corner.
This is the intersection of Sainte-Thérèse and Sainte-Anne, just off the Avenue de l'Opéra. Curiously, along Sainte-Anne, there's been this whole development of Japanese restaurants. So if you're in the mood for a Japanese soup or sushi, this is a good place to come in Paris. And there's also a bakery that specializes in matcha-flavored eclairs here at Aki.
Aki has a strong presence here in the Japanese district, not only with its boulangerie, but also with its Aki restaurant just across the street. Tired visitors often stop here for the popular soba noodle dishes and very reasonable prices. As is so often the case in Paris, the huge celebrity restaurants on the boulevards can cost an arm and a leg. But once you get just a few steps off the beaten path, you can find some quite inexpensive meals that are every bit as good. And an inexpensive lunch will leave you more money for shopping. That's where we're going right after this. We're in magical, creative, amazing Paris. The Palais Garnier Opera House in Paris set the style for building in the years that followed its triumphant opening in 1875. But the building itself is not the only influence on style around here, as I'll show you over at number 22, Rue de la Paix.
Rose Repetto sold her first pair of ballet slippers near the Opéra de Paris in 1947. And by 1959, she was so popular with ballet professionals that she opened this wonderful shop right near the Opéra. These days, you can still buy tutus and professional ballet slippers here, but there's also a whole line of streetwear and great shoes to walk around the neighborhood in, as lots of French models do.
The first pair of shoes made by Rose Repetto were stitched for her son, who was a dancer. When his dancer friends saw the shoes his mother had made, they asked if they too could have a pair. They simply adored the shoes Rose had sewn. Rose's son went on to become the famous French choreographer Roland Petit, and his mother's Repetto dancers' shoes gained quite a reputation. Other star-powered names have helped bolster the Repetto name as well, including French bombshell Brigitte Bardot, who created a sensation in the 1956 film And God Created Woman. Men watching the film may not have noticed what many women did. Bardot wore a pair of Repetto dance slippers she had ordered custom-made by the shop to reveal a little more of her toes than the traditional dance slipper. The film created an enormous demand for the shoes, and soon Repetto was adding more dance-inspired fashion to its line, which still includes some of the most classic and in-demand professional dancers' shoes anywhere. As we've seen at Repetto, it's often the case in a city as historic as Paris to get a little lesson in history along with your shopping. And the perfume company Fragonard is no exception. They're in the business of selling fine perfumes, soaps, and cosmetics, but they also operate the Museum of Perfume here in the shadow of the Palais Garnier.
It's housed in an 1860s building which was designed by a student of Charles Garnier, who built the opera. One of the last people who lived here was Maria Callas, the great opera singer.
Inside the Hôtel Particulier is the beautifully restored apartment of Madame Callas, which now houses the largest privately owned collection of the history of perfumery. Collected over 60 years by the grandson of Fragonard's founder, the collection spans some 30 centuries of perfume making. In such a place, it's easy to imagine the famed women of Paris using such gorgeous perfume bottles before they stepped out for a night at the Opéra. And here in the Musée Fragonard, you can also learn about how the fragrances were manufactured.
Now, over in this side, Fragonard, which was founded in 1926 in Grasse, has how they distill the plants to make perfume. You see, Grasse is a town surrounded by lavender fields and other plants that traditionally went into perfume. So it was logical that this perfume house comes from Grasse.
The essences that are mixed into harmonizing accords for perfumes are the result of distillation. Flowers and petals are harvested and placed in hoppers above copper boilers. As the water boils, the resulting steam passes up through the flowers, then passing into the cooling gooseneck on the still, where it condenses into liquid. This liquid then separates into water at the bottom of the container, with a thin layer of pure essence on the top. This essence requires huge amounts of flowers to create.
You need 3.5 European tons of rose petals distilled down to 1 mere liter of rose essence, which is why when you usually buy perfume, you buy eau de toilette that's been watered down and watered down. You very, very rarely buy actual pure essence.
And if a visit to Fragonard has put you in the mood to buy a little eau de parfum for yourself as a souvenir of Paris, it's as easy as a quick step around the corner to Fragonard's shop in the Opera District. And while we're on the subject of shopping, let me take you to the other side of the opera, to Boulevard Haussmann and some of the best shopping anywhere in Europe.
Galeries Lafayette and Le Printemps are two of the big department stores here in Paris. They're known collectively as the Grand Magasin, and they're tucked behind the Opéra Garnier. Now, Galeries Lafayette recently celebrated its 100th anniversary here in this building, which opened in 1912, and it's well worth stepping inside to admire the Belle Époque stained glass dome.
The splendid, colorful dome that crowns the huge interior space of the Galeries Lafayette is the result of the convergence of building techniques that were modern a century ago. The use of metal framing for buildings not only reduced the risk of fire in such public spaces, as was the inspiration for the completion of the Opera House, but the iron frame also made gorgeous, dramatic structures like this central dome possible. The glass panels of the roof were produced with new industrial techniques and lowered production costs. Despite these functional and economic realities, the resulting Cathedral of Commerce, as it has been called, is today an undeniable icon of Paris.
Galeries Lafayette recently opened the Bar du Premier, which is just one floor up from the ground, and it gives you this wonderful view, a place to rest after all your shopping, have breakfast, lunch, a quick drink. It's a wonderful place to admire the dome and the beautiful Christmas tree at Christmas time, which is installed by a different designer every year.
The Galeries Lafayette flagship store on Haussmann was constructed by architect Ferdinand Chanoux and glass artist Jacques Gruber over 100 years ago. The highest quality retailers from the world over still gather under the 10-story high dome, considered to be among the finest examples of Art Nouveau architecture anywhere. I'd like to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how magnificent Paris architecture is maintained right after this. We're in fabulous, extravagant, opulent Paris as we check out the amazing things to do and see around the Paris metro system's Opéra station. In a city with so much gorgeous architecture, even the shopping centers are as beautiful and ornate as opera houses. We just visited the 100-year-old Galeries Lafayette, and right next door, there's another historic store I just have to show you.
Le Printemps is not as well known as Galeries Lafayette for tourists visiting Paris, but this is actually a much older Grand Magasin. It's been in this location since the 1860s. The original building burned down in 1881. Not surprising when you consider that the big windows full of merchandise had to be illuminated by gas lighting. So when Le Printemps rebuilt in the 1880s, they actually installed electricity, which was a radical thing to do at the end of the 19th century. These days, it's worth coming to Le Printemps to look at the amazing craftsmanship in the restoration work they've done on the mosaics over the doors, the gilding on the cupolas, etc.
Gorgeous buildings like the ones we visited today are not simply designed and built. They also have to be maintained. Au Printemps is no exception and underwent a recent 3-year renovation on its fabulous exterior. During the work, all passers-by in the streets below saw was a huge graphic tarpaulin covering the worksite, while inside the tenting, a team of highly skilled artisans worked long hours on the extremely detailed mosaics. The century-and-a-half-old mosaics had lost portions over the years and needed to be restored to their original beauty. Each piece of the 50 different colors of glass was hand-measured, sketched out, cut to size, then placed in position with an attention to detail worthy of a fine jeweler. While the mosaic artists did their work, other artisans took on the task of restoring the decorative zinc elements. Molds were made of the original decorations and accessories, which were then reconstructed exactly before being installed on the restored structure. The final touches came in the form of brightly colored paint and gold leaf. The work is all the more amazing when you look back on the condition in which the restoration team found the historic building. This won't be the last restoration here, nor was it the first. Printemps, like Galeries Lafayette, is topped with a spectacular dome of glass and steel. The dome can be admired from the brasserie beneath, a true Parisian brasserie serving sophisticated food in unmatched surroundings. Printemps' stained glass cupola was completely disassembled and moved out of the city during the Second World War. The rescued treasure had to wait until the 1970s to be reinstalled. If you find yourself carried away with the shopping in Les Grands Magasins, not to worry. The Opera District is simply beautiful at night. The shop windows are continuously changing their eye-catching displays, and the fabulous Palais Garnier Opera House is simply awesome in the glow of floodlights that illuminate the elaborate exterior and bring out the colors in the stone and gilding. While many of the businesses in the area will be closed up for the night, others are just coming to life.
This is Harry's Bar, just off Opéra. It's been serving drinks for over 100 years. Opened in 1911, Harry's Bar has been serving expat Americans, especially because this bar was one of Ernest Hemingway's favorites. He drank here with F. Scott Fitzgerald, among other people. And on the front door of Harry's Bar, there is the address 5 Rue d'Onu, spelt phonetically, for slightly tipsy North Americans who want to tell the taxi where they're going so they can remember how to say the place right. This is also the place where they invented the Bloody Mary, so let's go in and check it out.
As well as the Bloody Mary, Harry's New York Bar is famed for the invention of some other delicious cocktails. Among them, the Sidecar, the French 75, and the unappetizingly named Monkey's Gland.
According to the Harry's ABC of mixing cocktails, this monkey's gland cocktail includes a dash of anise, 2 dashes of grenadine, half orange juice, half gin, shaken in one of the Harry's Bar's silver cocktail shakers by one of their illustrious barmen, strained into a perfect glass, and there you have it, the monkey's gland.
I'm going to finish my cocktail, purely out of historical interest, of course, and call it a night. It's been a busy day in the Opéra district, and I look forward to our next meeting on Paris, Next Stop.